sketches. So here I am in Blender 3.0, the latest version. Whenever it comes to geometry nodes, it's not even worth bothering with them in 2.93. They're a misnomer. The version 3.0 currently is the version that should be existing in the future. So with our cube selected, I'm just going to add a new graph, and we're just going to drag this over and just begin talking about some of the latest updates we've done with HardOps for the graph editor in this update. So right now we have no node selected. You can see that both of them are deselected. If we press Q and we click on cycle node, we see that we're actually able to scroll through basically every node. And the interesting thing about the nodes is that, by scrolling, you can actually see how many nodes are total. There's a total of 131 nodes in Blender. And so basically scrolling through every single node in order to get the right one is just not going to work for us, even though we could scroll and meticulously find the exact node that we need. There are faster ways. So now whenever you press tab, you can expand and bring up the .ui where you can basically go in and search for things. So let's say I typed in the word text. We see that text doesn't bring up anything. Let's type in string. And now whenever I scroll, we see that we're actually able to search for string nodes. And so just clicking, I now have this node selected, and I'm able to easily move it because it's the default selected node. Let's just put some default text in here, like Blender, and we'll connect it to the group input, so that way it shows up on the modifier. And if we connect this to the output, we see all we did was create a curve that says the word Blender. So this is where cycle nodes and its latest updates can show up in earnest. So if we just shift click, we are able to begin scrolling through nodes until we find the right node that would hypothetically be connected to this. So I want resample curve. We want to set this to 250. We'll select the resample, shift click in order to jump into a pin mode. And the next one that we're looking for is for cyclic. So we're just rolling up, set spline cyclic. The next one we're looking for is for us to trim the curve. And so whenever it comes to actually having a game plan as far as what you're doing with nodes, we see that there's some power in the scrolling system for being able to additively scroll and add your nodes. So whenever it comes to what these nodes do, this one basically turns a text entry into a curve. This one will take a curve point count and actually resample it, in this case turning it into 250. And this one actually will make the curve open-ended. So if it's not open-ended, we aren't able to trim it. So by basically making it cyclic, we're able to basically trim the curve and make it go in just like we're seeing. However, let's continue. So I'm just going to cycle node, and we see that if you don't shift click, you're basically going to scroll through looking for the right node. However, you're going to be doing it in this particular state. So it's still the same thing as we were talking about in the last update. In this case, we're looking for curve to mesh, which is right here, and we'll just expand this, go ahead and connect this. And so let's just deselect, press Q, cycle node, and we're back inside of all mode. And what we're looking for is a Bezier circle, which we can scroll our way to a Bezier circle if you want, but you could also just press tab and we can just roll up the .ui until we get to not mesh primitives. We actually want to scroll up even more until we get to curve primitives, and then when we roll the wheel, we're able to begin scrolling through just the curve primitives, which we already came across, curve circle, which is what we need. So let's just click and bring that out, and let's also connect our profile curve and set this to 0.01 so things just look better. And because this is just our taper object for our curve, basically, we don't need a resolution of 32. That's a lot of extra geometry. But now we actually have a mesh that we can see inside of render mode. So let's just create a quick material. We'll change this principled shader over to an emission, give it a cool color, pink. I wonder if I could just drag a material into the node editor. That would be cool, but we can't do that at this time. But what we can do is cycle through our nodes until we are looking for basically the material assignment, which it looks like we already found it. I was going to actually bring up the search function and search for it explicitly, but it looks like a little bit of scrolling, you can get there. So now we have a material assigned to this, meaning that whenever we hit render, we're looking at it looking like this. So let's press Alt-VV just to bring up our viewport adjustment, and we'll press V to turn off the background and press Q to turn on bloom. And from there, we now are looking at this the way that we want to show it. So now we have this curve that can say anything we want it to say, and we're able to adjust the N factor in order to adjust our curve. In fact, we could also play with the start as well. I never play with the start for some reason. Let's play with the start today. So the next thing from here is, I use Shift A to bring up the add menu, But because the add menu is so important, we also added it to the Q menu. So basically you can press Q, go to add, and then from there you could even right click your favorite nodes. Like for example, I always need a value node. So let's right click that, add that to quick favorites, and now we have a value node that we can bring in. So inside of this value node, I'm just going to zoom in and type in pound COS, open parentheses, frame, times 0. Let's go with 1.5 today. Actually, let's go with 0.25 today. And if we begin playing the animation, we can actually see what the value is going to. So it's going to go all the way up to +1 and then all the way down to -1, which is fine, but we don't want to put a negative value in this because there is no negative value for it to demonstrate. So this is a part where we want to map the value. So let's just shift click cycle node and roll our way to map range, which is precisely the node that we need. And we just want to go from -1 to +1 on our input and turn that to 0 and 1. So by just connecting it to our start, this is now what we have created, just very fast getting in and playing with geometry nodes. So I consider this like the first node tree that everyone should probably try to build because it's really basic and kind of shows you a lot of what geometry nodes has to offer. And I'm always looking for that sort of example. Whenever it comes to giving it some hang time, by lowering the number, we can make it hang on the start and also hang on the end. So now it'll say Blender, and then it'll just sit there. And the best part is we can go to the modifier and we can just make this say HardOps, and it'll just dynamically update, and we're able to just keep working. And I'm actually quite enamored with this process because this is something I previously used to have to use an add-on for, and now we see this just built into Blender, just easy as day, which is what we've always wanted to see. But with that, we'll wrap this and move to the next section.